Claire Saxby writes award-winning fiction, non-fiction and poetry for children. She writes big historical stories like Bird to Bird and the Anzac Billy, and she writes about iconic Australian animals like the big red kangaroo, emu, koala, dingo, and another one we'll find out about soon. She also does strongly rhythmic or rhyming works like Sea Dog and There Was Once an Old Sailor. She's quite the versatile writer. She's even just produced her first historical novel, Haywire, which we're going to talk about today, and has a new book illustrated by Tanya Herricks coming out soon, and we will definitely be talking about that. Claire started her career as a podiatrist and working in health and is now writing. So we've got quite a lot to check up with Claire and her journey happened. Claire Saxby, welcome to Portable Magic.
Thank you, Sue. It's lovely to be here.
That is quite a list and quite a range of story topics. How do you know you've got the idea you want to write?
Oh, I wish I did. It's an idea that won't let me go. And sometimes it can take many goes to get the right form for a story. For the novel, I really would have liked to have done that in a picture book form, but I just couldn't make it work, and it became obvious that it actually needed a lot more detail, and generally detail is what I leave out rather than put in. So the idea generates the particular form of story, even if I don't know what it is when I first start.
Haywire is your first novel after, I'm not even going to hazard a guess at how many picture books you've written, lots. How was that writing process? How did you go with it?
It was tricky. In every project, there's a period where I'm sure I'm not going to be able to do it. It's like I hop in a mud puddle and I wallow around and I can't see anything clearly. And I generally, every time will come out of my office and say to my husband, can't do this, I'm not good enough. I don't know how to make this work. And they used to try and help me, but now the whole family, but now Kerry just sends me for a walk or gives me chocolate. And I go for a walk and I get over myself and I come back in and go, I know what I can do. And there was an awful lot of that with the novel. There was a point where somebody said to me, this is like a novel written by a picture book writer. You perhaps need to put some of the detail in. And so that was a really different thing for me, to put in the detail that normally I leave as space for an illustrator to tell their own story. So it was a very different project, but I couldn't let it go.
And enjoyable? Did you enjoy it? Would you do it again?
Yes. And I didn't, in the middle of it, I would have said never, never, never. But there's something about that long form story that I did enjoy getting to know the characters. I'm not very good at writing character descriptions, and I have to live them. I have to write them. I have to let them tell me what they're like as I write them. And that can be a messy way to do it, but that's the only way that I can make it work. And having done that, yeah, I quite like the idea of doing it again.
Oh, good. I think that point, we'll just go back a bit to, the character profiles compared to just getting in there and do it. I think it's really important that there's no right way. It's what works for you. That's the key to writing.
And I remember saying to somebody once, I wish I was a plotter. I wish I could get those details down first. And she said, well, what makes you think that it's any easier for plotters? And it was like, okay, that makes sense. So I don't wish to be anything other than I am. And although it would always be nice to make it an easier thing, it is just the way I work, and it works eventually if I stay there and keep going.
It is. It's that old Bryce Courtney thing of bum glue, isn't it? Just staying in the seat. Yeah. And I think we need to swap husbands, because I come out of the office usually around the 15,000 word mark and going, crap, I can't write, I'm useless. Bruce looks up and goes, 15,000 words are we at, do you think? Right, thanks for your support. So tell us about Haywire. It's set in New South Wales. It's I keep going to say historical novel, because there's nothing funny about it. Tell us about it.
Okay, so Haywire is the story of two boys, and one of them is sent out of Germany by his parents when it's evident that World War II is about to happen. And he's sent to stay with his uncle in London, but the paranoia in England becomes such that he and all Germans are rounded up and put in an internment camp. That isn't enough for some people, so they decide that they're going to ship these internees out of the country, and they lean on their Commonwealth friends, and some go to Canada, and a shipload, 2,500 of them, come to Australia on a ship called the Dunera. When they get to Sydney, they are put on a train and sent up to Hay, which is in the middle of New South Wales, a long way from the ocean, whichever way you go. And my second character, so Max is the German character, and Tom is the son of the local baker. And he's very bright, and he's just been offered the opportunity to sit for a scholarship to go to Sydney and finish his education and perhaps become a doctor. And World War II happens, his two older brothers sign up, he's pulled out of school and has to work in the family bakery. These two boys meet when Max arrives in Hay, and it's the story of both of them hearing all this noise from around them about their role, politics, different views on the war, and how they have to work out their own, how they feel about it and what they want to do about where they are in the world, in their lives at that point. And yes, and so they both want to escape, basically.
Are you finding, because it's been out now, it came out in COVID, and we're sort of coming to, when I say COVID, the isolation phase, we're coming to the end of the first wave. Who knows what will happen with the next? Are you finding people are saying, oh, I thought there was only the Cowra prisoner of war camp with Japanese? Do people know about Hay and what happened?
I haven't heard it specifically, but it certainly is the reason that I wanted to look at this story. To me, it's an astonishing story. And what happened after the end of my novel, is even more astonishing, about the way these men stayed, and many of these men stayed in Australia and contributed such incredible gifts to the literature scene, the art scene, the music scene. They were incredibly influential people. And they came here by accident and compelled by others. And it was just such an interesting story. People aren't saying so much about Cowra, but they are saying that they didn't realise this story. They didn't know that we did this, or that this was imposed on us, on Australia. They really didn't have a great deal of choice. They had to choose somewhere in Australia that fit 6 criteria, and I keep forgetting the other 5, but the 6th one is that it had to be built on sand so that they couldn't tunnel out. And any group of people less likely to tunnel out, I don't know. These Dunera boys, they were much more interested in making music, in writing plays, in looking after the young people, getting them ready for university. They were just astonishing.
Amazing. Claire, when we write historical novels, we tend to have to use our imagination a little bit because we weren't there, we can't go back and, but in one sense, you were able to go back and it changed your story a little bit, didn't it, when you went to Hay?
Yes. I looked at aerial maps, I spent a lot of time on regional newspapers on Trove. I can tell you when they had Red Cross training meetings, when they had how many sheep were being sold and what they did with the football, and none of which ends up in the novel except very fleetingly. And I thought I had it covered. And then I had the opportunity to travel to Hay and I discovered two things that I had quite lent on quite strongly. And one is that when Max escapes, there's a culvert on the side of the road for him to hide in. They don't have culverts. They don't get that sort of rain. Their rain is different. So they don't need these great big deep drains, and certainly nothing you can hide in. Had to change that. The other thing was that the river features very strongly, particularly in the second half of the novel. And I had rocks. I had Tom going and sitting on these big boulders by the side of the river. It's a sandy river. So I had to rewrite elements of those things. You know, nobody else is going to know, but I know. And as I have to make up a lot, but what I don't have to make up, I want to be as accurate as possible. So yeah, yes, another rewrite.
I know you get that sinking feeling of, oh God, but you're so grateful, but you also have that sinking feeling.
Yeah. Yes.
Before we get on to that exciting new book, not that Haywire isn't exciting, it is very exciting. It's a fabulous read. How does a podiatrist end up writing children's books? How did you get to where you are?
Okay. Well, the thing about podiatry is that you generally are one-on-one, and it's each appointment is between 30 and 60 minutes. And so you're in this room with an individual for that length of time. And I've generally worked in community health, which means I'm seeing people with more complex needs, and so they're often there for longer. And often I would be working with migrant populations. And so I want to know their stories. I was always fascinated by their stories. And the last decade or so before I started writing as well, I was working with Second World War migrants, and most of them from Southern Europe. And so there were people from Poland and Germany and Italy and Greece and Malta. And my geography's okay, but it's not that great. And talking about how they came to be here was really, really interesting. And so that notion of teasing out story was a very much part of what I do, as well as you needing to do that as part of your diagnosis and treatment plan anyway. But once you've done that, then there's time for this human story. And I found it fascinating. And so that probably was my link into writing. And then when I did some classes, and then once I started doing writing for children, it's like, yeah, this is my voice. This is the sort of story I want to tell. This is the audience that I want to reach. And so I did them both side by side for a while. And then I had a choice between I had to make a decision. And really it wasn't a difficult one. And I don't regret it for a second.
What was your first book?
It was an education novel very short novel called Banana Beard and the Bowler Bunny. I was into alliterative titles right at the start. And actually my first picture book was called Barking Barnacles. We got the bees again. But it was actually, it came out of something that one of the people that I was working with said to me. So it is a very link between my two jobs. They seem quite different, but really, you know, it's 1 degree of separation. Yeah.
As a kid, were you a writer?
Not so much of, I mean, I did write at school and I probably wrote at home, but we moved to Papua New Guinea when I was 10. So any evidence of that is gone. I did write some poetry, and it ended up in school magazines throughout school, but not consciously. And so when somebody actually suggested to me, a teacher, that maybe I should try writing, it was like, oh, yeah. And so I did. So slow learner, perhaps.
No, I've got this theory that we need to live and experience before we're able to actually put it out in stories. I think you've got to live life a bit first. It's my theory.
I think that certainly worked for me. And I know there were stories I had to write that are not intended for anybody else to see. And I almost needed to clear them out of my head before my head could focus on writing for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Claire, with your process, I know you're a big researcher. How do you go about writing, say, let's look at Sea Dog. How do you go about writing a rhyming piece compared to writing something like the Anzac Billy?
The research is different. It's lived experience. It's watching. It's based on my dog, Emmy, who just loved rolling in smelly things. And we'd had her for 6 or 7 years before I worked out how to make it her story, one of her stories, into something that for other readers. And walking was really good for stepping out rhythm and for hearing the language. And I think it was, when I was writing it, it was about, I mean, you know, there's all sorts of wisdom about don't write negative things. And the whole refrain of that is, you know, our dog is not a this, is not a that. And I was thinking about the expectations that we have of pretty dogs are different to rapscallion looking dogs, yet they're dogs. Dogs do dog things. And at the same time, I'm writing about children. There is an expectation that girls will behave in a different way because they're girls. There's an expectation that if you are beautiful, the rules for you are different. And I wanted to talk about being a child. You do child things. And that includes all the gross stuff as well as all the lovely stuff. And that imposing the way somebody else thinks you should behave is not really very helpful for that child. And so that all came into this stepping rhythm, the patterning that I got, and these different episodes. And, you know, Emmy provided me with lots of things that she didn't do. She didn't bring a ball back. She'd look at a stick. She would chase a stick and she'd find it, and then she'd sit down and go, come on, catch up. And so she didn't do any of the things that dogs are supposed to do. And I wanted to catch that, but I wanted to catch it in a light-hearted, I didn't want to talk about kids. I didn't want to talk about expectations. I just wanted to have fun. And so that's the sort of work that I do for those ones, those sort of books. There's always something there if you want to look for it, but it's a fun romp. And I think our children need that sort of playfulness in addition to more serious or, you know, differently constructed texts. I think we need them all to become rounded human beings.
And so loved. As you know, I've told you my sister-in-law was not at all going to be kind to you because that was on, Sea Dog was on nightly rotation for months. She'd hide it and he'd find it. And I'm going, yes. She's going, no, you don't understand. I'm going, no, you don't understand. So what about compared to the Anzac Billy and the kind of research that must go into that?
Again, I found the story of these billies when I was researching something else. It only happened once in this way, so it was an accidental finding, 3 lines in Trove when I was looking for something else. And I researched these billies and I researched how many were put together and how they were put together and all of those things, but that's not the story. The story is for little children, for small children, for early school age. So I had to find a way to tell this another war story in a way that had no guns and didn't go on a war field and didn't have a death. So when I found my character, it was like, this is an everyman or an every child story the absence of a parent and the ways of another parent to keep a contact with the absent parent. And once I found that and started to think about, what are the things that a child loves that they would want to give to their father that the father may not necessarily love. Maybe he hates butterscotch, or maybe he hates, he sends the yucky fish, which the dad loves, but the child doesn't. And so you get this sense of a child being bigger than their own passions, but offering things that will make their dad feel better. And so once I got that sort of viewpoint, then I felt quite comfortable inhabiting that small boy and telling his story.
And then you throw in with your beautiful words, Mark, and how there's illustrations. And I mean, I was with you, we were together the first time I read it, and I kept going, oh, it is just an exquisite book. Let's go to your next project that is coming out in August. Yes. And I can't wait, because you've teamed up with Tanya Harricks before and you've teaming up with her again. Would you like to tell us about this story?
Yes, so this story is another iconic Australian animal, and I don't have a book yet. COVID is slowing down deliveries of all sorts of things and changing practices, but I do have a pretend book.
Oh, I'd love to see a pretend book.
There's a pretend book about a kookaburra. And I don't start these books until I find something that is weird and unusual and sometimes really gross about these animals. And that sort of stuff doesn't necessarily end up. It's like I have to find the flaw, in a koala. Koalas are absolutely divine and we just love them, but they've got some pretty gross behaviors when they're past, apparently gross behaviors. And the kookaburras are the same. The kookaburra nests tend not to be, they can't jump into a nest. So they have to have sort of like a sloping entry point. And they have around 3 eggs, and they don't unsheath their feathers until they're just about to fledge, because they poo in there. And if their feathers came out before they were really ready to fly, then they would be totally covered in poo and they wouldn't be able to learn to fly. So I need to find out those sort of, this is real things. I want to find out the real gritty, nitty gritty things. And then I can look at them as a flawed wonder, in the way that all people are. So all these animals, these behaviors have evolved for all sorts of reasons, and I love that. I also, one of the other things with the kookaburra is they use monocular vision to spot their prey, and then they flip around, use the binocular to locate it, and then swoop, which is why they're so successful. How cool is that?
That is, I had no idea. I've seen them give you the beady eye, when you're eating a sausage in the Grampians.
That's what they're doing.
Oh, wow. So did you end up getting the poo and the feathers story? Because I haven't seen it yet. Have you got the poo and the feathers in, or did you decide to leave that out?
I left them out because I also want to keep, when I'm sharing these stories with kids, I want to be able to read the room and decide whether that's something that's going to be appropriate in that particular group. And there's a bit of a rule in publishing that if you put poo in it, they don't look at anything else. Young kids, a certain readership won't even see anything else. All they'll see is, on page this, here we've got this. So I left it out. But having that knowledge, the young stay around for a second year after they're fledged to help prepare the next one, but also to practice parenthood. And they're really clumsy. They want to have a go at sitting on the nest sometimes, but they're really clumsy and they sometimes crack the eggs. So they're not a lot of use. And so there's all that sort of stuff that I can keep out, but it still feeds what I put in.
Absolutely. And I had no idea their, I guess their sense of community and family. I had no idea till, you know.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, I could keep going, but it's like, and that happens when I'm researching these. I'll go out and I'll have a day researching and writing, and I'll go out and I'll say to Kerry, "Did you know?" And they, Kerry and my children, when they were here, understand that when I get to that point, that they're in for random facts about these amazing animals for quite some time.
Oh, you can't help it, can you? Because you get so passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah,
So,
and it's so cool.
Claire, what's next after? Because I know when you finish a book and when it's coming out as a book, there is probably 2 or 3 other projects moving along the line. What's next for you?
On 1st of September, actually, it's been quite a quick process. I'm releasing it's a biography of Georgia Ward Fear. Now, Georgia Ward Fear is an animal biologist. Do you know her?
I know of her.
Well, that's one ahead of me. I didn't really know about her, but she's an amazing young scientist doing incredible things, particularly in animal conservation. She did some amazing work with teaching goannas not to eat cane toads. Brilliant. So that comes out on the 1st of September.
And is that illustrated?
It's got black and white scattered throughout, one per chapter, I think. I haven't seen it yet. A couple of images through each one. It's pitched at mid to upper primary, and that's going to be fun. That's going to be fun to share because Georgia's done some amazing things. Lots of amazing things. I had a pirate book, another rhyming one, that was due out in March. It got pushed to some other time, but now it's gone out to March next year. And as it turns out, that was just prescient, because it would have been very difficult to talk about it. And it's about what happens when you find a bag of pirates on your lawn. So it's absolute nonsense. It was such fun to write. It's going to be wonderful to share with readers. And it's a really nice balance to stories that make people sad or make people cry. Hopefully this one will make them laugh. And it's just absurd. And it's illustrated by Tal Sawanakit, and his illustrations are amazing. These little pirates that are in every, the pirates that are rescued just get up to such mischief. And there's an octopus, a purple and pink octopus that sort of is in every page, and tries to use a sewing machine, and it's just into everything. It's such fun. So that's what's coming up. Oh, and there's a shark book too.
I was going to say, are you going to talk about the other one?
Great white shark. I don't have an absolute date for that, but it's sometime next year. And Cindy Lane, who's a Western Australian artist, is doing the most amazing sharks and other sea creatures for this one. So, yeah, it's
fabulous.
Lovely stuff.
Just to finish up with, what was the gross fact or the thing that got you in about great white sharks?
They can evert their stomach. So when they've eaten something, because I told you it was gross, I warned you, they can't chew, so they grab and they swallow. And if what they swallow has indigestible bits, then they can turn their stomach inside out so that it's almost out of their mouth and expel those bits. How cool is that?
Well, it's a party trick. It's a definite party trick. Not one I'm going to develop. Did that make the book? That didn't make the book, or it did?
No, that's in. That's
good.
Yeah, there are some others, but that was the best gross one.
Yeah, that is. I had no idea. I knew they had rows of teeth and blah, blah, blah and bitey bits, but no, I didn't know they could do that. Claire, as always, it's a delight to talk to you. best of luck with Haywire. It's a fabulous book. It is junior fiction, would you say, or middle
It's
grade?
sort of junior middle grade.
Yeah.
I've seen reviews that say year 7, year 8, and I've seen other reviews that say from mid-primary up. All of them, obviously.
Everybody read it. It's a fabulous read, and I can't wait to see Kookaburra, because I know big red kangaroo, emu, koala and dingo. I have to read it because I always leave one out, and it's usually emu. Are such fabulous reads and so beautifully illustrated, so I can't wait for Kookaburra.
Thank you very much, Sue.